On my 27th birthday, the air inside the restaurant shimmered with perfume, laughter, and a kind of wealth that didn't feel real anymore. The chandeliers glowed like frozen fire above a room full of strangers who shared my last name. My grandfather, Thomas Waverley, raised his glass. His voice, calm but deliberate, carried over the quiet clinking of cutlery. "So, tell me, Clara," he said with a faint smile, "how does one spend $3 million before turning 30? For a heartbeat, I thought he was joking. Then the laughter faded. I blinked once, twice. What money? Silence rippled through the table like a dropped stone. My mother's fork hovered mid-air. My father's throat tensed, his jaw working as if swallowing a confession. Grandfather leaned back, unhurried. "The trust fund I created when you were born. You were supposed to receive it 2 years ago." My world tilted slightly off its axis. "I don't have a trust fund." Across the table, my mother's smile faltered. A tiny, brittle crack in porcelain. "Dad, you must be mistaken." He didn't look at her. "Am I?" His voice was mild, but the weight behind it filled the room. I could feel the waiters watching from the periphery, sensing tension but pretending not to. The conversation dissolved into a dense, suffocating quiet. I thought this dinner was to celebrate me, a rare family moment in a life mostly lived alone. Instead, it felt like the opening statement of a trial. Until that night, I thought I understood my family. We measured love and reputation, success in silence. Questions were rude, emotion was weakness. I'd grown used to distance. A freelance designer scraping by in a small San Francisco apartment while my parents lived across the bridge, surrounded by marble, glass, and carefully curated happiness. We spoke often, but never truthfully. The last time they surprised me, it was at my graduation. They handed me a neatly wrapped box, Financial Wisdom for Millennials. I'd smile for the photos, pretending not to notice the irony. Since then, I'd built my life from spare change and long nights, late projects, cold coffee, and rent reminders. When I lost my design contract a week before my birthday, I called my mother hoping for empathy. Her response? "You'll figure it out, darling. We all have to learn discipline sometime." That same woman now sat across from me, clutching her wine glass like a lifeline, pretending this was a misunderstanding. Grandfather's aide entered quietly, a leather folder in hand. "Sir, the statements." He slid a thin file across the table, my name printed in neat black type. Clara Waverly Trust, established 1998. Grandfather opened it with surgical calm. Initial deposit, 1 million. Adjusted growth, approximately 3.2. He paused. As of this morning, less than 200,000. The air fractured. My pulse thundered in my ears. He turned to my parents. "Explain." My father cleared his throat, words trembling out. We used a portion of it. The recession hit hard. Just temporary, of course." $3 million is not temporary," Grandfather said quietly. My mother's voice was small. "It was for her future. We were only trying to manage it responsibly." I laughed, short, brittle, and bitter. "You mean control it?" Her eyes filled, perfectly timed tears. "Sweetheart, you don't understand. We protected you." Protected. The word tasted like rust. Grandfather closed the folder. Enough. His gaze swept across them, cold and final. We'll continue this privately. A waiter guided us to a side room, shutting the door behind us. The noise of the restaurant vanished. Only our breathing remained. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. That night, surrounded by candlelight and lies, I realized something awful. This wasn't a family dinner. It was an ambush dressed as a celebration. And as my grandfather's voice echoed in that small, silent room, I felt my life begin to split, before and after. What he said next didn't just expose them, it rewrote everything I thought I knew about my own bloodline. The moment the private room door closed, the noise of the restaurant vanished, replaced by the low hum of the air vent and the soft crackle of nerves unraveling. My grandfather stood at the head of the table, his shadow stretching across the floor like a verdict. "We'll keep this brief," he said, voice measured but sharp. "I don't enjoy theatrics." Across from me, my father adjusted his cufflinks, the same nervous tell he'd had my entire life. My mother sat still, her lips pressed so tight they looked bloodless. A woman entered quietly, tablet in hand, my grandfather's assistant, Lena. She placed a single folder in front of me. "These are your account statements," she said softly. "Everything from the day the trust was created." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Line after line of transactions, all neatly printed, the mortgage payoff, new cars, renovations, travel bookings, each one another slice of betrayal. 460,000, she read aloud, for the Bayview property mortgage. 2 vehicles, a Model X and a Model S, totaling 280. A renovation project listed under Waverly Design Group, 320. She hesitated. Purchase of coastal property, Monterey, 1.6 million. I lifted my eyes. "You bought a beach house with my money?" My father started to speak, but my grandfather's voice cut through him like glass. "It's not her money you spent, James. It's her future." The silence afterward was unbearable. My mother's hand shook as she reached for her purse. "Dad, please, we can fix this. You'll start by surrendering the property deeds and car titles tonight." I sat frozen as she opened her bag, pulling out a small key ring, 2 keys, 1 fob, and something else. A folded note with my name on it. She pushed them across the table. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. I picked up the keys. Cold metal, familiar brand, and yet they didn't feel like gifts. They felt like evidence. I said, "You taught me to never ask for help. Now I see why." Her tears slid down her cheek, practiced but hollow. "We only wanted to protect you from making the wrong choices." "By making them for me?" My voice cracked. "You took everything." My father leaned forward, his composure crumbling. "We invested. It was still yours in the long run." "Investment requires consent. You had none." Lena set a document in front of him. "Sir, the audit shows pending wire transfers to Costa Rica, booked 3 days ago." The air turned to ice. My mother's eyes widened. "Who told you?" He didn't answer. "So that's where you were going." He glanced at me. "They were planning to leave, Clara." I felt something collapse inside me. Not anger yet, just disbelief too deep to process. My parents' faces blurred for a second, and all I saw were strangers wearing their smiles. "You were going to disappear?" Run before I found out? Neither of them answered. Unbelievable, my grandfather muttered. He turned to Lena. Transfer control of the remaining funds to my office and notify my attorney. I want a full legal freeze by morning. Yes, sir. When Lena left, the room felt colder than before. My parents stared at the table, their reflection fractured in the mirrored surface. For once, I didn't fill the silence. I let it sit. Heavy, suffocating, deserved. My grandfather exhaled slowly, the sound tired but resolute. Clara, he said, turning toward me, I'll recover what's possible, but the choice to press charges, that belongs to you. The words sank deep. I looked down at the folder, the signatures, the numbers that mapped my stolen life. For 27 years, I'd been told to stay polite, stay grateful, stay quiet. Maybe silence is what made this possible. When I finally looked up, I wasn't crying. I whispered, I just need time. He nodded once. You'll have it. But understand this. Justice rarely waits forever. Outside the window, the city blurred in the fog, lights stretching like veins across the dark. I left the restaurant with those keys in my pocket and an emptiness that felt new, raw, and dangerously clear. That night, when I caught my reflection in the bus window, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Something in her eyes had changed. 3 days later, I'd learned that my parents weren't done fighting, and neither was I. 3 days passed in a haze of sleepless hours and unanswered questions. The first night, I kept the folder on my kitchen counter, unopened but visible, like a wound I couldn't stop touching. Every page inside it whispered the same thing. You were never part of their plan. I didn't eat much. I couldn't. My phone stayed silent except for news alerts and promotional spam. My parents hadn't called, not even once. Until that morning. The number flashed across my screen. Private caller. For a moment, I almost ignored it. Then I heard the voice. Clara, it's Lena, my grandfather's assistant. Calm, professional as always. Mr. Waverly would like to see you at the estate today. Noon. Something in her tone told me this wasn't a request. I arrived early. The Waverly estate sat on the edge of Pacific Heights. Tall iron gates, perfect hedges, the kind of money buys. The last time I'd been here, I was 16, walking across the marble floor in shoes that pinched, pretending I belonged. Lena met me at the door. She's waiting in the study. When I entered, my grandfather was standing by the window, a cane in one hand, though he didn't seem to need it. A small fire burned behind him, its reflection flickering across the glass. He turned when I approached. You look tired. I've been reading, I said softly, setting the folder on his desk. Good, he replied. You should know every detail. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him. Sit. There's something you need to hear. I sank into the chair, the smell of old paper and cedar filling the room. He picked up a manila envelope from the desk and slid it toward me. This came to me yesterday, an anonymous delivery. Inside was a USB drive. My stomach tightened. What's on it? He opened his laptop, inserted the drive, and turned the screen toward me. A video began to play. Security footage from a bank, time-stamped 6 months earlier. My mother and father stood at the counter, signing documents. The angle shifted. Another camera caught the banker handing over a folder labeled Offshore Transfer Authorization. Then came the sound, muffled but clear. My father's voice. She'll never know. As long as the old man stays out of it, she'll think the account doesn't exist. I froze. Oh my God. My grandfather's voice was low but steady. They created a second account, a mirror fund. It held what they couldn't explain away in expenses. How much? He hesitated. Nearly 1.8 million. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Where is it now? Frozen, he said. My lawyers moved quickly, but that's not why I called you. He closed the laptop. Clara, I'm old. My health isn't what it was. And your parents, they will try to recover what they've lost. You need protection, not just legal, but strategic. He reached for a sealed envelope on the desk and pushed it toward me. This is my revised will. It's not final yet, but I wanted you to see your name where it belongs. My breath caught. You're leaving me the company? He nodded slightly. If you want it. It's not just money, Clara. It's legacy. But it comes with enemies, and some of them share your blood. I sat in silence, feeling the gravity of it settle inside me. He leaned closer, his voice softer now. Before I die, I need you to promise me something. Don't forgive them too quickly. People who steal once will always look for a way to steal again. I understand. He smiled faintly. No, you don't. Not yet, but you will. When I left the estate, the sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that threaten rain but never commit. In my bag were two things, the folder of evidence and an envelope with my name embossed in gold. Halfway down the driveway, my phone buzzed again. A message. Unknown number. Meet me. 8 p.m. There's something your grandfather didn't tell you. I thought I was done uncovering lies, but that message led me to the one secret my family had buried deeper than money. By 8 that night, the city had turned to silver. Rain spilled down the glass like melting static, blurring the skyline into a trembling reflection of light and distance. I shouldn't have gone. Every logical part of me said ignore it. Anonymous messages never lead to anything good. But curiosity is a quiet poison, and mine had already seeped too deep. The address was a cafe near the harbor, one of those narrow places wedged between shuttered art galleries and forgotten bookshops. The sign flickered weakly. Echo. Inside, it smelled of wet pavement and espresso. Only one person sat there. A man in a charcoal coat, hat pulled low, a paper cup steaming in front of him. When he looked up, I froze. Ethan! He smiled faintly, a familiar curve I hadn't seen in years. You still remember? I did. Ethan Vale, my father's former financial advisor, the quiet one who'd vanished right after the recession hit. I was 19 then. He'd been more of a rumor than a person, mentioned only in fragments my father never wanted to explain. You sent the message? I asked, sitting opposite him. He nodded. I needed to warn you before your grandfather does something irreversible. Warn me? I leaned forward. About what? He scanned the room before lowering his voice. You think your parents acted alone, but the money trail doesn't end with them. Someone higher up helped move those funds offshore. My pulse quickened. Who? He hesitated. Thomas Waverly. The name hung between us like a blade. I stared at him, half expecting a smirk, a confession that it was all a joke, but his eyes were steady, unreadable. That's impossible, I said. He exposed them, froze their accounts. Exactly. He knew where to look because he built the system that allowed it. Those offshore accounts, they weren't created 6 months ago. They've existed for 20 years. Your parents just used them first. The room tilted slightly. I could hear the hiss of the espresso machine, the rain beating against the windows, my heart beat somewhere in between. You're saying my grandfather? He cut in. I'm saying that the money he claims to have frozen never truly left his control. He's using you, Clara. He needs a scapegoat and an heir who won't question the past. I shook my head. No, he's not like them. He sighed. You want to believe that. So did I once. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive, sliding it across the table. These are copies of internal memos and transfers from Waverly Holdings. If you check the timestamps, you'll see who signed them. I didn't touch it. Why give this to me? Because I made a mistake back then. I helped him hide the first transaction. I thought it was legal, a temporary shield during the market crash. Then I realized what he was doing. And what was that? He looked at me, eyes dark under the cafe's dim light. Turning your inheritance into his escape plan. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, outside, lightning flashed, a brief white pulse that lit the entire harbor. When it faded, I noticed movement beyond the window. A black car parked across the street, someone sitting inside, watching. Ethan noticed too. His expression tightened. We don't have much time. He stood quickly, pulling on his coat. Don't contact me again. Open the drive somewhere safe, not at home, not near the estate. Ethan, wait! But he was already at the door. Rain swallowed him whole before I could move. I sat there, the flash drive in my palm, the rain thickening outside like curtains closing on a stage. My coffee had gone cold. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Through the glass, the black car's headlights blinked once, deliberately, slow, then the engine roared and it pulled away into the night. I didn't realize until much later that I was still clutching the drive so tightly my nails had left crescent moons in my skin. The next morning, I plugged the drive into my laptop, and the first file I opened didn't show numbers or signatures. It showed a body. Morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of silence that makes even the city seem afraid to breathe. I hadn't slept. Ethan's words had replayed in my head all night. Your grandfather built the system. It didn't make sense. Could both sides of my family really be capable of this level of deceit? By dawn, the flash drive felt like a live wire in my pocket. Too dangerous to keep, too important to destroy. I made coffee, black and bitter, then pulled my laptop from the shelf. Not my main one, the spare, older model I used for freelance work. No synced cloud accounts, no tracking. I plugged the drive in. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared. /Waverly Internal Archives. Inside were 6 files, each labeled by date, some as old as 2006. The last one was marked simply, Final. I opened the oldest first. Transaction spreadsheets, offshore transfers, statements linking multiple shell companies. Everything Ethan had described, every number connecting back to my family's empire. It was real. Then I opened the last file. The screen went black for a second. Then a video began to play. Grainy security-style footage, time-stamped March 17, 2016. A large office, dim light, the Waverly crest visible on the wall behind the desk. My grandfather sat in the corner, talking to someone just off camera. The voice that answered was familiar, my father's. At first, it was business talk. Funds, mergers, foreign accounts. Then, near the end, my father's voice lowered. We can't risk him finding out. If Ethan talks, we're finished. My grandfather's reply was calm. Then make sure he doesn't. The screen flickered. The camera angle shifted to the building's hallway. A man, Ethan, walked toward the exit. 2 other men followed. The footage stuttered, then froze at the moment one of them raised an arm. The next frame was static. When the picture returned, Ethan was gone. My heart pounded in my chest. He was alive. I had seen him last night. But according to this footage, he should have vanished years ago. I replayed it twice, then noticed something I hadn't before. The timestamp didn't stop at the static. It continued, 12 seconds longer. The audio hissed faintly, then a faint voice whispered, distorted but recognizable. My grandfather's. Clean it and bury the record. I slammed the laptop shut. My breathing came shallow, uneven. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the coffee mug. Because if this was real, and if my grandfather really had collapsed, then either he'd been silenced, or he'd silenced himself before I could ask why. The doorbell rang. I froze. The sound echoed through the apartment, sharp against the silence. Another ring, longer this time. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, closed the laptop, and walked to the door. My voice barely worked. Who is it? A pause. Then a woman's voice. Clara, it's Lena. Relief hit me, but only for a second. When I opened the door, she stood there in her black coat, her usual calm replaced by something harder to read. You need to come with me, she said quietly. Your grandfather's been asking for you. I blinked. Now? Why? Her eyes flicked to the hallway camera above my door, then back to me. It's urgent. Something about her tone was wrong, too rehearsed, too even. I hesitated. Is he all right? She lowered her gaze. He's not well, she said. He collapsed an hour ago. My stomach twisted. What happened? They're saying it was his heart. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the city outside and the rain beginning again. Then I nodded slowly. Give me 5 minutes. When I closed the door, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the old laptop, the flash drive still warm in my hand. Because if the video was real, and if my grandfather really had collapsed, then either he'd been silenced, or he silenced himself before I could ask why. By the time I reached the estate, the gates were locked, and someone else was already waiting for me inside. Rain chased me all the way to Pacific Heights. It came down in sheets, turning the cobblestones into mirrors that reflected the mansion's iron gates. The Waverly estate loomed ahead, dark, silent, and much too still for a house that size. Lena's car idled near the curb. She'd insisted on driving, saying the roads were slick and the media might already be sniffing around. But the whole way there, she hadn't spoken once. When we pulled up, the gate lights flickered, then stayed red, locked. Lena frowned. That's strange. Security should have opened by now. Maybe they're with him, I offered, but something about the air felt wrong. The rain should have drowned out every sound, yet I could hear the faint mechanical hum of the estate's backup generators. Lena pressed the intercom. This is Lena Holt, Mr. Waverly's assistant. We're here for Miss Clara Waverly. Static. Then a voice, male, clipped. Hold. A minute later, the gates groaned open. Inside the courtyard was scattered with vehicles, 2 black sedans, 1 ambulance, and a police cruiser. Blue light strobed across the windows like ghosts pacing inside. I climbed out before the car fully stopped. My shoes splashed through puddles. A paramedic brushed past me, head down, radio crackling. He's already gone, I caught him saying. My chest tightened. Gone? No one answered. I stepped into the house. The scent of antiseptic and smoke clung to the air like something had burned and been quickly hidden. The lights were dim, some flickering. A uniformed officer met me in the foyer. Miss Waverly? Yes. I'm Officer Grant. I'm sorry for your loss. Mr. Thomas Waverley was pronounced deceased at 8:27 p.m. The words barely landed. They felt distant, muted, like hearing a story told underwater. Lena came in behind me, eyes wide but dry. The doctor said his heart simply stopped. He'd been under stress. Officer Grant nodded politely, yet his expression said he didn't quite buy it. "Can I see him?" I asked. He hesitated. "They're finishing up in the study. Just be prepared." I walked down the corridor I knew since childhood. Portraits stared down at me, painted ancestors with the same sharp jawline and cold gaze. The house seemed to breathe, every creak a whisper. The study door was half open. Candlelight spilled through the gap. Inside, my grandfather lay on the couch, blanket over his chest. His face looked oddly peaceful, but too pale, like a wax figure waiting for display. A paramedic zipped a black bag beside him. I stood there, frozen. Lena touched my arm. He went quickly. "Was anyone with him?" I asked. She shook her head. "Security found him like this." I looked toward his desk. The laptop was gone. "Where's his computer?" Lena blinked. "What?" "His laptop. It was always there." I'm sure the police have it, but Officer Grant was by the window, making notes. When I asked him, he frowned. No device was logged on the scene. The room seemed to shrink. My grandfather dead, his evidence missing, and somewhere in my coat pocket, the flash drive that might prove he'd known what was coming. Grant's radio crackled again. "Unit 6, confirm perimeter secure." He stepped out to answer, leaving me and Lena alone. I turned to her. "When did you last see him?" "This afternoon," she said. "He seemed distracted. Asked me to prepare an envelope for you." She handed me a sealed letter from her coat. My name in his handwriting. I tore it open. Inside was a single line. "Trust no one who arrives too early." My blood ran cold. "Clara," Lena's voice wavered. "What does it say?" I folded the note quickly. "Nothing important." Just then, movement flashed in the hallway mirror. A tall figure passing the doorway, coat drenched, face obscured by shadow. "Who's that?" I whispered. Lena turned, startled. "Security, maybe?" But when I stepped into the hall, the corridor was empty, only the faint drip of water on marble leading toward the back staircase. A trail of wet footprints. Fresh. Whoever was inside wasn't gone yet. I followed those footprints, and what I found in my grandfather's hidden wing proved he'd been planning for his death all along. The footprints led down the west hallway, past the portraits and the scent of rain still clinging to my coat. Each print was sharp against the marble, glistening where water hadn't yet dried. Whoever had been there had entered minutes ago, maybe seconds. The power flickered again. For an instant, the chandelier dimmed and the whole house seemed to hold its breath. I moved carefully, phone light low, my shoes silent on the rug. At the end of the corridor stood the old grandfather clock, its pendulum motionless, as though even time had stopped to listen. That's when I noticed it, a faint draft near the baseboard, carrying the smell of dust and oil. I crouched. The airflow came from behind the clock. I pushed gently. The clock shifted with a muted creak, revealing a narrow seam in the wall, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. My grandfather's note echoed in my mind. "Trust no one who arrives too early." I slipped my fingers along the edge until I found a small metal latch. It clicked. The panel opened inward, revealing a short staircase disappearing into darkness. I hesitated only a moment, then descended. The air grew cooler, thicker. My phone light skimmed over stone walls lined with wooden shelves, stacks of boxes labeled in my grandfather's handwriting, W. Holdings, Archive B. At the bottom, the tunnel widened into a private study. A single lamp glowed on a steel desk. Papers covered every surface, ledgers, maps, handwritten notes. In the center lay a sealed envelope marked simply, "For Clara." I reached for it and froze. A man's voice came from the shadows. "He meant for you to find this." I spun around. A figure stepped forward, water dripping from his coat. The man from the hallway. "Who are you?" I demanded. He removed his hood. "Name's Ducker, private security. Mr. Waverly hired me months ago, off record." "Security, then why hide?" "Because the people upstairs aren't all police." He nodded toward the ceiling. "One of them's corporate, Waverly Holdings legal counsel. They're searching for this room right now." I tightened my grip on the envelope. "Why? What's in here?" Decker's jaw clenched. Evidence and instructions. He knew his death was coming. Said if anything happened, the estate would move fast to bury everything, literally. I tore open the envelope. Inside were two things: a hand-drawn map of the property and a small brass key. At the top, my grandfather's handwriting read, "Phase 2, Trust Reversal." What does that mean? Decker shook his head. "I only know he said the real trust wasn't money. It was information, something that could collapse the whole Waverly empire." He moved toward a filing cabinet, pulling out a folder wrapped in plastic. "He told me to give this to you if I couldn't reach him. I was on my way when they called about his collapse." I opened it. Inside were photographs, old faded documents stamped "Confidential." One image stopped me cold. A construction blueprint of the Waverly corporate tower downtown with a sublevel circled in red. "Sub-basement 4, I read aloud. "What's there?" Decker lowered his voice. "A vault. Not for money, but for data. Server backups, transaction records, everything the company tried to erase." I looked at the key again. Small, ornate, numbered SB4-17. He wanted you to find the vault, and he wanted the world to see what's inside. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Decker tensed. "They're here." Footsteps. Two voices. Male. Getting closer. He nodded toward a second passage at the back of the study. "That tunnel leads to the garden shed. Go, now." "What about you?" "I'll stall them." Before I could protest, he pushed the lamp off the desk. It shattered, plunging the room into darkness. "Go," he hissed. I grabbed the map and the key, slipped through the passage, and ran. The tunnel tilted upward, air damp and cold. I could hear muffled shouting behind me, then the crack of a gunshot. One, maybe two. When I finally emerged into the garden, the rain had stopped. The mansion stood silent, its windows glowing faintly under the storm-lit sky. I looked at the map again, water dripping from my hands. The next step was clear. Whatever waited beneath the Waverly Tower was the truth my grandfather had died protecting. And someone upstairs had just killed to keep it buried. At dawn, I drove to the city with the key around my neck, because if I didn't open that vault first, someone else would. By the time the rain eased, dawn was bleeding into the horizon, gray light spreading over San Francisco's skyline like an unfinished confession. I hadn't slept. My grandfather's letter, the brass key, the map, they were all I had left of him. And now, I was driving toward the Waverly Corporate Tower, a place that had always looked more like a monument than an office. This city was waking up, indifferent. People crossing streets, coffee in hand, unaware that somewhere beneath their feet lay a secret that had cost a man his life. The key hung from a chain around my neck, cold against my skin. I kept replaying Decker's last words. He wanted the world to see what's inside. If Decker was still alive, he'd find me. If he wasn't, I had to finish what he started. The Waverly Tower rose like a blade into the fog. 47 stories of glass and arrogance. The lobby was polished and silent, every step echoing. I moved through the security using my old family clearance badge. It still worked. That fact alone chilled me. Someone must have left it active on purpose. I took the elevator down, past the lobby, past the parking levels. When the screen stopped at B3, I swiped the badge again and held my breath. A hidden panel lit up below the buttons. B4. My grandfather's handwriting on the map matched the number on the key. SB 4-17. As the elevator descended, the hum of the city disappeared. Only the sound of cables and machinery remained. When the doors opened, I stepped into silence. Sub-basement 4 wasn't on any blueprint I'd ever seen. It was narrow, industrial, walls of concrete, rows of old server racks humming faintly under dim emergency lights. Dust drifted like snow. At the far end of the room stood a reinforced vault door. Brass, circular, embossed with the Waverly insignia. I ran my fingers over the keyhole, identical to the one on the key around my neck. It slid in perfectly. With a heavy click, the mechanism unlocked. The door creaked open. Inside was not money or gold. It was a private archive. Rows of drives, folders, and sealed containers. A terminal sat at the center, its screen blinking, access granted, T. Waverly Protocol. My hands trembled as I sat before it. On the desk lay a small flash drive identical to the one my grandfather had given me weeks ago. The label read, Mirror 2. I inserted it into the port, the screen flickered, and my grandfather's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, Clara, it means I was right. They came for me. I froze. His voice was calm, tired, and filled with that steady authority I'd always known. This company was built on trust. But when trust is betrayed, the empire rots from within. The people you think are protecting our name, they're the same ones laundering it, hiding assets through shell fronts and false charities. He paused, coughing faintly. Inside this vault is every transaction, every offshore account, every sign falsification, 40 years of deception. They'll destroy anyone who threatens to expose it. That's why you must not go to the authorities. Not yet. The screen changed, displaying documents, scanned signatures, offshore ledgers. My father's name appeared. Then my uncle's. Then a woman I didn't recognize. Margaret Holt. Lena's last name. Margaret Holt, my grandfather's voice continued, was my assistant once. She became theirs. She'll reach you first. Don't let her near the archive. The terminal beeped. Data upload in progress. 23%. My pulse raced. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the corridor. Sharp. Heavy. Not security shoes. Heels. I turned. Lena stood in the doorway, raincoat dry, expression calm. I was hoping you wouldn't make it this far, she said softly. Margaret Holt. I whispered. She smiled, That familiar, gentle smile now turned to something cold. Thomas should have stayed loyal to the family, but you never learned how to stop digging. My grandfather's voice faded as the upload reached 40%. She drew a pistol from her coat. "Step away from the terminal, Clara." I raised my hand slowly. "He trusted you." "He trusted the wrong people." She glanced at the screen. "And if you want to live long enough to walk out of here, you'll hand me that drive." I looked at the progress bar. 46%. Just a little longer. "I can't do that," I said. She sighed. "Then I suppose this ends the way it always had to." Her finger tightened on the trigger, and the elevator behind her dinged open. 2 shots rang out. Lena collapsed. Behind her stood Decker, gun still smoking. "Miss me?" he said, grimacing from a shoulder wound. The upload hit 100%. The terminal beeped once, then displayed, "Transfer complete, mirror sent to external server." Decker lowered the gun. Whatever he planned, it's already out there. I looked at Lena's body, then at the flickering monitor. Somewhere in the cloud, the truth was spreading. And for the first time, I realized my grandfather hadn't died in vain. He'd simply started a war I now had to finish. But within an hour, the news broke, and the Waverly name wasn't the only one on the list. By sunrise, the world had changed. I sat in a diner on the edge of Market Street, my reflection caught in the fogged glass. The television above the counter buzzed faintly, volume low, but the headline unmistakable. Waverly Holdings data leak, alleged fraud, offshore funds, and family ties. The words didn't feel real. I watched footage of police cars surrounding the tower I'd just escaped hours earlier. My grandfather's company, our family's legacy, was now front-page scandal. A reporter's voice cut through the static. Sources claim the leak originated from an internal archive, exposing decades of money laundering and political kickbacks. Officials have yet to confirm who released the data. I stirred my coffee without tasting it. My hand still shook faintly, from adrenaline, from the memory of Lena, Margaret, falling to the floor, from the echo of my grandfather's voice. Across from me, Decker sat hunched over his phone, shoulder bandaged with napkins and duct tape. He looked up. "You realize what this means, right? You're the leak." I nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to start a fire. I just opened a door." He gave a dry laugh. "Doors like that only open one way." I glanced around the diner. A few customers were staring, not at me specifically, but at the news. Still, paranoia had a sound, a hum behind the ears, a pulse in the throat. Decker leaned in. "We can't stay here long. They'll be looking for you." "Who's they now?" "Everyone." He wasn't exaggerating. My phone buzzed with messages, unknown numbers, corporate contacts, journalists. Even my father. I hadn't seen his name on my screen in years. I hesitated, then answered. "Clara?" His voice was tight, controlled. "What have you done?" "I think you already know. You've destroyed everything your grandfather built." "No," I said quietly. "I exposed what you turned it into." There was a long silence. Then, "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? You think the board will let you walk away after this?" "I'm not asking for permission." "Then you'd better start asking for protection." The line went dead. Decker exhaled. "Well, that didn't sound promising." I stared out the window. The street outside was flooded with cameras and vans, reporters setting up live shots, police trying to control the crowd. The city smelled of rain and panic. "What happens now?" I asked. Decker rubbed his temples. "The FBI will move in, the board will lawyer up, and whoever was backing Margaret Holt," he paused, "they'll want to erase the trail, including you." My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unknown number. Just one line. "Meet me at the pier before sunset. He wasn't the only one who left you something." Attached was a photo, grainy, time-stamped that morning. A safety deposit box key. The tag read, "Bay Harbor Bank, Box 312. I looked at Decker. "Someone else knows." He frowned. "That's a trap. Or the next piece." He shook his head. "You don't even know who sent it." "Maybe not," I said, rising from the booth. "But my grandfather did say phase 2. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Helicopters circled the tower like vultures. The Waverly Empire was collapsing, live on every channel. But something told me my grandfather hadn't meant for it to end here. The vault, the upload, that was only the beginning. As I stepped into the street, the city air felt sharper, electric. Every headline, every whisper seemed to follow me. I turned to Decker. "You don't have to come." He smirked faintly. "I've already been shot once for your family. Might as well finish the job." I almost smiled. "Then we'd better find out what's waiting at the pier." He nodded. "And Clara, whatever's in that box, it'll decide how this ends, or who survives it." We walked toward the rising sun, past the chaos, past the cameras. The truth had been unleashed, but now came the harder part, staying alive long enough to face it. By the time we reached the pier, I realized the message wasn't from a stranger at all. It was someone I'd buried years ago. Had passed, but the air still smelled of electricity and salt as we drove toward the pier. Decker's bandaged arm rested on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the mirrors every few seconds. The radio was a wall of noise, commentators arguing over the leak, politicians denying, analysts speculating who the insider was. They didn't know my name yet, but they would. The pier stretched ahead like a line drawn between light and darkness. The bay's water glimmered beneath, restless, as if it knew the secrets floating just below the surface. We parked near the end, beside an old seafood shack. The place was closed for the evening, the sign half lit. "Bay Harbor Bank is 2 blocks inland," Decker said. "If this is a trap, we'll see it coming." I nodded, slipping the key into my pocket. The tag, Box 312, was smooth from years of handling, as if someone had held onto it for a long time before sending it to me. The bank sat wedged between warehouses, its faded sign hinting at a history older than the corporations it now served. Inside, the lighting was low, the air cool and heavy with disinfectant. A clerk at the counter looked up. "Deposit access." "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Box 312. She typed something, frowned. "Name." "Clara Waverly." Her expression changed, just slightly. She pressed a button beneath the counter. "One moment." I glanced at Decker. He caught the signal instantly, his hand inching toward his coat. Moments later, a man in a dark suit appeared from the back. His smile was professional, but his eyes weren't. "Miss Waverly," he said smoothly, "if you'll follow me." He led us through a glass door into the vault level. Rows of safety boxes gleaming under fluorescent light. The hum of the building's old ventilation system filled the silence. He gestured to box 312. Your grandfather maintained this under a secondary trust. It was never linked to the main family accounts. I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting. Inside was a black envelope and a small drive identical to the one from the mansion, but marked with red tape. Before I could reach for it, the man spoke again. He told me you'd come. I froze. What? He stepped closer, his smile fading. Thomas Waverly. He made arrangements. He said if the tower fell, and if you opened that box, I should give you this. He handed me a folded letter, sealed in wax. Decker's hand tightened on his gun. What's your role here? The man sighed softly. My name's Callan. I was your grandfather's attorney, but after what I saw in those ledgers, I stopped being anyone's lawyer. I broke the seal. The letter inside it was written in my grandfather's hand. Familiar, deliberate, unshaken. Clara, if you've found this, then the storm has already begun. The data I left in Mirror 2 will expose what's visible. But what you have now, the red mark drive, is what comes next. It contains the one thing that can't be erased. Proof of who ordered the first cover-up. The same person who took your mother's life. My vision blurred. For a second, I thought I'd misread. She didn't fall, Clara. She was pushed. And the one who pushed her still walks free, wearing our name. I lowered the paper, breath caught in my throat. He's saying my mother's death wasn't an accident. Decker's jaw clenched. And the killer's still in the family? I looked back at Callan. Did you read this? He shook his head. No. But I know the file's encrypted. It needs both the red drive and the original Mirror 2. To open, I said. The copy I left uploading in the vault. Callan nodded. Then whoever has access to that upload now has half the code, and they'll be hunting you for the rest. The air between us turned colder. Decker glanced at the door. We need to move. If the leak's live, they'll trace us here in minutes. I tucked the drive and the letter inside my jacket, my heartbeat matching the hum of the vault lights. My grandfather hadn't just exposed corruption, he'd buried the truth of my mother's death inside it. As we stepped back into the night, the bay shimmered darkly beyond the glass. Clara, Decker said quietly, you realize what this means. The real enemy isn't the company anymore. It's blood. I stared out toward the water, wind catching my hair, the city lights bleeding into the waves. Then it's time to finish what he started, even if it kills me. But by the time we reached the car, someone had already beaten to it and left a message written in blood across the windshield. Night had settled heavy over the bay, that strange hour when the world feels half asleep, but danger doesn't. The air smelled of diesel and salt. Somewhere, a foghorn moaned across the water. Decker and I walked fast toward the car, the red drive and my grandfather's letter still burning in my pocket. The parking lot was nearly empty, just rows of dark silhouettes under flickering streetlights. But as we got closer, I stopped dead. The windshield gleamed with something that wasn't rain. A single line scrawled across the glass in thick crimson letters. Go home, Clara. For a heartbeat, I thought it was blood. Then I saw the smear pattern. Oil paint, maybe? But the color was too precise, too deliberate. Decker drew his gun. Stay behind me. I scanned the shadows. The lot was silent except for the soft click of a dock cable, yet the feeling of being watched pressed against my skin like static. He checked the driver's side. Clean. Then the trunk. Locked. He crouched, shined a small flashlight under the chassis. "Tracker," he muttered. "Small one, probably GPS-based. Can you remove it?" "Yeah, but that means they know we're here already." I swallowed hard. "Then they'll expect us to run." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Exactly. So we don't." We got into the car, drove a block, then pulled into a shadowed alley between two closed warehouses. Decker yanked the tracker free and dropped it into an abandoned shopping cart. When he started the engine again, he said, "Whoever left that message knows your habits, knows what home means." My mind went immediately to the Waverly estate. The house? He shook his head. "No. Too obvious. Where do you really go when you're cornered?" I hesitated. "My mother's cottage, up north. It's been empty for years." "Then that's where they'll wait." The thought chilled me. The cottage had always been my sanctuary, an echo of my childhood, of her. The idea of someone standing there, waiting, made my stomach twist. Decker turned the car toward the freeway. "Still, it's our only lead. Whoever sent that paint message might have left more." The highway stretched dark and endless. The radio whispered fragments of chaos, indictments, resignations, speculation about the mystery whistleblower. My name hadn't surfaced yet, but the leak had detonated globally. I leaned my head back against the seat. "Do you think my grandfather planned this far ahead? All of it?" Decker glanced at me. "He was a strategist, right?" "Then yeah, he probably planned for every move except the human ones." "The human ones?" He smirked faintly. "People break plans. That's what makes them dangerous." We drove in silence for another hour until city lights gave way to forest shadow. The road wound upward, lined with pines whispering in the wind. Finally, we reached the narrow lane that led to the cottage, a small, weather-worn house overlooking the cliffside. The gate was open. Decker killed the headlights. "Stay here," he said, slipping out with his gun drawn. I watched him move through the darkness, steady, cautious. My breath fogged the glass. The cottage looked the same, yet wrong. One curtain fluttered in the open window, though no breeze reached inside. Then a light flickered in the living room. A lamp. My mother's old brass one. I got out, against Decker's warning. Gravel crunched under my shoes. The smell of cedar and sea filled the air. When I stepped inside, the room was neat, almost too neat. The lamp glowed softly on the table, beside a single item. An old photograph. My mother, my grandfather, and between them, a man whose face was half turned away, but whose ring I recognized instantly. My father's. Scrawled across the back of the photo, in the same crimson paint as the windshield, were 3 words. "Ask him why." Decker appeared behind me, breath quick. "Nobody here, back doors open to the woods." I turned the photo toward him. "It's him, my father." Decker's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time to stop running and start asking." Thunder rumbled far out at sea, echoing through the windows like a warning. I slipped the photo into my coat. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from rage. Whoever had left that message wanted me to confront the one person who taught me to trust lies. And for the first time since this began, I intended to. The next morning, I drove to my father's estate. But when I arrived, the gates were already open and the police were waiting. Morning came colorless and thin. The forest mist rolled across the road like smoke as I drove toward my father's estate. The closer I got, the more the air felt heavier, like the ground itself was waiting for me to ask the wrong question. When I turned to the final corner, I saw the gate standing wide open. 2 police cruisers flanked the entrance, lights off but engines running. A uniformed officer stepped forward, hand raised. "Ma'am, this property's under active investigation." I lowered the window. Clara Waverly, this is my father's home. Recognition flickered across his face. You should speak with Detective Rains. He's inside. The driveway felt endless. Every step toward the mansion echoed against the marble silence. Police tape draped over the front door like a wound bandage. Decker parked behind me, scanning the perimeter. Someone got here first. Inside, the air smelt of gunpowder and old cigars. The living room, once my father's cathedral of control, was chaos now. Drawers pulled open, paper scattered, glass cracked across the floor. A detective looked up from his notebook. Miss Waverly, I'm Detective Rains. What happened here? He hesitated. We received a call about shots fired around dawn. When we arrived, we found a male, mid-60s, deceased in his study. I stopped breathing. My father? Rains nodded slowly. Preliminary suggests self-inflicted, but... He glanced at Decker. The angle's off. We're still verifying. I moved past him before he could stop me. Down the corridor, past the portraits of generations who'd built empires on silence. My father's study door hung open. He sat slumped behind the desk, a revolver still on the carpet beside his hand. The sunlight cut through the window, striking his face just enough to show the bruised exhaustion beneath it. Decker stood at the threshold, saying nothing. Rains followed us in. There's something else. We found this on the desk. He handed me a note sealed with wax, the same wax my grandfather used. I unfolded it carefully. My father's handwriting, shaky, almost unreadable. Clara, your grandfather was right to keep secrets. I just never realized I was one of them. The night your mother died, I wasn't at the board meeting. I was at the bridge. She'd found out what we'd done, the accounts, the transfers, and said she was going public. I didn't push her, but I didn't stop the man who did. His name was Walter Holt, Margaret's brother. They said it would protect the company and protect you. The paper trembled in my hands. I could almost see it. The bridge, the rain, my mother's coat flashing red under the lights. Decker whispered, Walter Holt, the same name on the offshore ledgers. Rains cleared his throat. Does that name mean something to you? I folded the letter, voice steady. It means my family never buried its ghost. It just hired them. He nodded slowly, understanding more than he said. We'll need you to come down to the station later for a statement. I looked at my father one last time, the man who taught me ambition, discipline, loyalty, yet had stood still while my mother was murdered for all three. Decker placed a hand on my shoulder. We should go. As we stepped outside, the morning light had sharpened, cutting through the fog. Reporters were gathering at the gate now, microphones raised, hungry for grief. I kept walking. In the car, Decker asked quietly, What now? I opened my palm, revealing the small brass key from the red drive, the one still untested. He said Walter Holt. That means there's one more person who knows everything. Decker started the engine. And you're going after him? Yes. The sun broke through the clouds, spilling gold over the estate, over the flashing cameras, over the ashes of everything that had once been the Waverly name. I spent years believing revenge was destruction. Turns out, it's clarity. Decker nodded. Then let's get you some. As we pulled away from the gates, I didn't look back. The house behind me was no longer a home. It was a mausoleum of lies finally cracking open. But somewhere out there, Walter Holt was still breathing, and the truth wasn't finished yet. By nightfall, we tracked Walter Holt to a private airstrip outside Monterey, but the person waiting beside his jet wasn't him. It was someone I thought I'd buried with my past.
Dusk fell like bruised velvet over the coastline as we reached the private airstrip outside Monterey. The place was nearly deserted, just the distant hum of generators and the whine of a single idling jet under floodlights. Decker parked the car 100 yards away, engine off. "That's Holt's plane," he murmured, checking his sculp. "Scheduled to depart 30 minutes ago, but the pilot's still waiting. Something's holding them." The runway shimmered with heat ghosts from the tarmac. The smell of fuel hung thick in the air. "Do we move in?" I asked. "Not yet. We watch." We crouched behind a service vehicle, shadows swallowing us whole. I could feel the pulse of the engines in my chest. Then the cabin door opened and a figure stepped out. Not Walter Holt. Her. Margaret Waverly. My aunt. She looked almost serene, dressed in a tailored ivory suit, her silver hair catching the floodlight like spun glass. 2 men in black followed behind her, armed, scanning the perimeter. Decker cursed under his breath. "That's not a pickup. That's an extraction." My heart thudded once, hard. She's leaving the country. Not if we can stop her. Before he could move, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice, calm and sharp as a blade. "Clara, don't be foolish. You're not ready for what comes next." I froze. "Margaret." On the runway, she turned her head slightly, as if she could see me through the dark. "Your father made a mess of things, but he did one thing right. He kept you out. You could still walk away." "Walk away from what?" I hissed. "You killed my mother." A soft chuckle. "No, dear, I saved her. From the people your grandfather worked for. She just didn't understand the terms." The words sliced clean through me. "You're lying." "Am I?" "The truth is in that red drive, but you've only seen half. The other half was locked for a reason. Your mother wasn't the only one who wanted to expose the family. Your grandfather did too, before they silenced him." I pressed the phone tighter. "Who's they?" Silence for a heartbeat. Then, "Come to the hangar, Clara. See for yourself. After tonight, I'm gone forever." The call ended. Decker glanced at me. "Trap?" "Definitely." He exhaled. "Then we spring it carefully." We moved along the shadows of the hangars, my pulse syncing with the hum of the jet. Margaret stood near the open hatch now, speaking with the pilot, her posture precise and unhurried, as if she knew she had already won. When we were close enough, I stepped out from behind the fuel tank. "Going somewhere, Aunt Margaret?" Her head turned, slowly, gracefully. For a second, she looked almost proud. "Clara," she said softly, "so much like your mother, always mistaking righteousness for strength." Decker flanked to the side, weapon raised, hands where I can see them. She smiled faintly. "Still playing detective, Mr. Decker? You have no idea how far this goes." I moved closer. "Tell me about Walter Holt, about the bridge." Margaret's expression didn't flicker. "Walter is dead. And your mother? She was never meant to die. She was meant to disappear. Your father changed the plan. Guilt made him sloppy." She stepped closer to the jet, her voice lowering. "But you could fix everything. The foundation, the board, the name, it's all waiting for someone with your bloodline and your conscience." "I don't want your empire," she narrowed. "Then you'll burn with it." She turned sharply, signaling her guards. Decker fired a warning shot. They ducked behind the landing gear. The pilot shouted something in French, engines roaring louder. Margaret took one last look at me, calm, deliberate. "You'll learn soon enough what your mother really did. When you find the second half of the drive, tell her I kept my promise." Before I could move, she stepped onto the ramp. The hatch sealed. The engines screamed. Decker and I ran toward the runway as the jet thundered forward, wind and dust tearing at our faces.
It lifted off, vanishing into the bleeding horizon. I stood frozen, the echo of her words twisting in my head. The second half of the drive. Decker walked up beside me, breath ragged. "She's gone." "No," I whispered. "She just told us where to look." He frowned. "Where?" I looked down at the tarmac, the faint outline of a symbol Margaret had drawn with her heel before boarding, a circle intersected by a single line. My mother's sign for home. That night, we returned to the one place I swore I'd never enter again, the ruins of my childhood home. And there, buried beneath the piano, we found the second half of the truth. The drive back to the old Waverly estate felt like traveling through a memory I didn't want to reopen. The trees along the road seemed taller than before, the branches heavy with secrets. It had been years since I'd crossed that iron gate. My father had sealed it the year my mother died. The house stood waiting on the hill, the windows blind with dust, the roof bowed by time. Yet, even from a distance, I could feel it. Something inside still breathing. Decker stopped the car and cut the lights. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded. If Margaret said the second half of the drive is here, it's because my mother wanted it found. We stepped through the warped front door. The smell hit first. Dust, cedar, faint perfume still clinging to the wallpaper. Moonlight leaked through the cracks, painting everything in silver. I ran my hand over the banister. This was her world. Every book, every photograph, every rule. Decker swept his flashlight slowly across the hall. Where would she hide something that mattered? I said, she played piano every night. When my grandfather came to visit, she'd play until everyone left the room. She said music was the only language he couldn't control. The grand piano still stood in the corner of the drawing room, shrouded under a heavy sheet. I pulled it off and coughed as the dust spiraled upward. The keys were yellowed, brittle. Decker knelt beside it, tapping the floor. Hollow. We moved the piano a few inches, enough to reveal a rectangular cut in the wood beneath it, a concealed hatch. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside was a small metal box, wrapped in a faded silk scarf. My mother's. The initials EW still stitched in one corner. I opened it slowly. Inside lay a second red drive, identical to the first, except for one difference. A tiny symbol etched near the edge, the same circle and line Margaret had drawn on the tarmac. Decker exhaled. We found it. But something felt wrong. The air had changed. Too still, too quiet. A floorboard creaked behind us. Decker spun, gun raised. "Who's there?" From the shadows at the end of the hall, a low voice answered. "You shouldn't have come back here, Clara." I knew that voice. Cold, deliberate. Walter Holt. He stepped into the moonlight. Older than I remembered from photographs, his face lined like carved stone. A silencer glinted in his hand. "Your father should have burned that house down. Your mother begged him to." My chest tightened. "You killed her." He tilted his head. "I tried to save her, but she wouldn't listen. She wanted to expose everyone. The foundation, the shell accounts, your aunt, even me. Margaret thought she'd run. I knew better. She was too brave for her own good." Decker aimed. "Drop the gun, Holt." Holt smiled faintly. "You have no idea what you're part of, detective. The Waverleys didn't just steal money. They built nations, toppled others. That drive you're holding, it's not evidence. It's a death sentence." He raised his weapon. A gunshot cracked through the room, sharp, deafening. But it wasn't his. Holt froze, disbelief flickering across his face. A dark bloom spread across his chest. He stumbled back, hit the wall, and slid down silently. Decker lowered his smoking gun. "He was going to shoot you." For a moment, I couldn't move. The man who'd ended my mother's life lay at my feet, lifeless, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no peace, only emptiness. I crouched beside Holt's body, his fingers still clutched something, a key card marked with the same circle and line emblem. I took it. Decker looked at me. We need to leave. Cops will be here soon and this scene won't look clean. I nodded, pocketing the drive and card. Not yet. We upload it first. Wherever my mother meant this to go, it goes tonight. We left through the back, the night air thick with the scent of gunpowder and rain. The old house loomed behind us, silent once more. As we drove away, I glanced at the second red drive in my hand. For years, it had slept beneath the piano, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to dig up the truth. Now, it was awake. When Decker decrypted the second drive, the first file wasn't numbers or names, it was a video. My mother, speaking directly to the camera, recorded 3 days before she died. The drive back to the old Waverly estate felt like traveling through a memory I didn't want to reopen. The trees along the road seemed taller than before, their branches heavy with secrets. It had been years since I'd crossed that iron gate. My father had sealed it the year my mother died. The house stood waiting on the hill, the windows blind with dust, the roof bowed by time. Yet, even from a distance, I could feel it. Something inside still breathing. Decker stopped the car and cut the lights. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded. "If Margaret said the second half of the drive is here, it's because my mother wanted it found." We stepped through the warped front door. The smell hit first. Dust, cedar, faint perfume still clinging to the wallpaper. Moonlight leaked through the cracks, painting everything in silver. I ran my hand over the banister. This was her world. Every book, every photograph, every rule. Decker swept his flashlight slowly across the hall. Where would she hide something that mattered? I said, she played piano every night. When my grandfather came to visit, she'd play until everyone left the room. She said music was the only language he couldn't control. The grand piano still stood in the corner of the drawing room, shrouded under a heavy sheet. I pulled it off and coughed as the dust spiraled upward. The keys were yellowed, brittle. Decker knelt beside it, tapping the floor. Hollow. We moved the piano a few inches, enough to reveal a rectangular cut in the wood beneath it, a concealed hatch. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside was a small metal box, wrapped in a faded silk scarf, my mother's. The initials EW still stitched in one corner. I opened it slowly. Inside lay a second red drive, identical to the first, except for one difference. A tiny symbol etched near the edge, the same circle and line Margaret had drawn on the tarmac. Decker exhaled. We found it. But something felt wrong. The air had changed. Too still, too quiet. A floorboard creaked behind us. Decker spun, gun raised. "Who's there?" From the shadows at the end of the hall, a low voice answered. "You shouldn't have come back here, Clara." I knew that voice. Cold, deliberate. Walter Holt. He stepped into the moonlight, older than I remembered from photographs, his face lined like carved stone. A silencer glinted in his hand. "Your father should have burned that house down. Your mother begged him to." My chest tightened. "You killed her?" He tilted his head. "I tried to save her, but she wouldn't listen. She wanted to expose everyone, the foundation, the shell accounts, your aunt, even me. Margaret thought she'd run. I knew better. She was too brave for her own good." Decker aimed. "Drop the gun, Holt." He smiled faintly. "You have no idea what you're part of, detective. The Waverleys didn't just steal money. They built nations, toppled others. That drive you're holding, it's not evidence. It's a death sentence." He raised his weapon. A gunshot cracked through the room, sharp, deafening. But it wasn't his. Holt froze, disbelief flickering across his face. A dark bloom spread across his chest. He stumbled back, hit the wall, and slid down silently. Decker lowered his smoking gun. He was going to shoot you. For a moment, I couldn't move. The man who ended my mother's life lay at my feet, lifeless, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no peace, only emptiness. I crouched beside Holt's body. His fingers still clutched something. A key card, marked with the same circle and lined emblem. I took it. Decker looked at me. We need to leave. Cops will be here soon, and this scene won't look clean. I nodded, pocketing the drive and card. Not yet. We upload it first. Wherever my mother meant this to go, it goes tonight. We left through the back, the night air thick with the scent of gunpowder and rain. The old house loomed behind us, silent once more. We reached Decker's apartment just before dawn. The city outside was still half asleep, the streets wet from a night that had refused to end. The red drive sat on the table between us, small and silent, but heavy enough to change everything. Decker powered up his laptop, inserted the drive, and started decrypting. The process crawled like molasses, every second dragging its weight through the air. I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the skyline pale into gray. If my mother really recorded something, then she knew this was coming. Decker looked up. She didn't just hide it, Clara. She planned it. The progress bar reached 100%. A single folder appeared on the screen. Eleanor's last. Decker double-clicked. Inside were only 2 files, one labeled confession.mp4 and the other Project Hero. I felt the breath leave my lungs. Play the first one. He pressed enter. The video opened to darkness, then static, then focus. My mother sat before the camera in her study, wearing the same navy blouse I remembered from her last night. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes clear but tired. The date on the corner read June 14th, 2012. If you're watching this, then the walls have finally fallen. She began softly. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the weight in it, the kind that comes from knowing too much. The Waverly Foundation was never about charity. It was a front, a vehicle for transferring funds into political networks across 5 countries. Your grandfather built it, your aunt perfected it, and your father, he protected it. I tried to stop them. She paused, swallowing hard. Walter Holt warned me that speaking out would destroy us. He was right, but not in the way he meant it. I didn't care about the money. I cared about you, Clara. I wanted you to grow up believing truth was still something worth fighting for. My throat tightened. She looked older than I remembered, not in years, but in spirit. The evidence is split across 2 drives, one for them to find and one for you. If I don't make it back from the bridge tonight, promise me something. Don't avenge me. Expose them. She leaned forward, her eyes filling the frame. You once asked me what strength meant. It isn't fighting, Clara. It's enduring, even when the truth hurts more than the lie. The video ended with a faint static hum. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing closer. I hadn't realized I was crying until Decker reached out a hand and quietly placed a tissue on the desk. She knew everything, he said, and she trusted you to finish it. I nodded slowly. Then I will. Decker cricked open the second file. Project Hero. Inside was a cascade of encrypted PDFs, wire transfers, internal memos, and one name repeated across them all. Margaret Waverly. She was moving millions into private security contracts, companies tied to shell governments, arms, propaganda, laundering influence. I leaned closer. That's what she meant. They built nations, toppled others. This wasn't about family money. It was about control. Decker's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then frowned. We've got a problem. What kind? They know we opened it. IP trace from a ghost server in Geneva. Someone's watching the file activity in real time. My pulse spiked. Margaret? Or someone higher? He began copying the files to an external drive. We need to get this to someone who can protect it and you. I looked back at the frozen image of my mother on the screen. Her eyes seemed to follow mine, as if urging me to move. I know who, I said quietly. There's one person who can leak this safely. Decker stared at me. Who? I met his gaze. The journalist my mother trusted before she died, Lydia Vale. She's the only one who ever tried to publish the Waverly accounts. He nodded. Then that's our next move. Outside, the first light of morning cut through the blinds. Cold, thin, relentless. The truth had finally spoken. Now the world had to hear it. By noon, every news outlet was searching for Lydia Vale. But when we reached her apartment, the door was open, and the walls were covered in photographs of my mother. As we drove away, I glanced at the second red drive in my hand. For years, it had slept beneath the piano, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to dig up the truth. Now it was awake. When Decker decrypted the second drive, the first file wasn't numbers or names. It was a video. My mother, speaking directly to the camera, recorded 3 days before she died.